my name is Matt Doran. Thank you for your patience. My name is Matt Doran, and it's my real pleasure and privilege to introduce two artists from my neck of the woods, from the UK, Richard Rita and Jochen. They are, for me, they are really interesting artists. They are multidisciplined, very good crafts people, great ideas, great imagination. And I'm going to pass the mic over to Richard to explain a bit more detail on what they do.
Thanks, Matt. It's really lovely to be here. I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes whilst we're still fixing up the hoses. So, I became obsessed with glass, I suppose, in the mid-90s when my city of Leeds, where I was going to art school, started getting rebuilt in what seemed to be glass. And I thought, well, this is the future. I want to make work that responds to this. And that brought me to Edinburgh, and then I went on to New York, where I got interested in neon at Alfred University. And the thing about neon, I don't know if we have people in the crowd, well, I do know that we've got some real specialists in neon in the crowd. The initial observations of it were how, regardless of your background, you couldn't help but look at it. It had this real rubbernecking effect, whether you were that student going to English Lit or some science class or something like that. So I wanted to befriend this, what seemed to be a very influential medium. Came back to the UK, and disappointingly, there were no art schools that offered the subject. I wasn't able to continue my interest, and I was in this position like 99.9% of artists, creatives, where they have to draw their idea, give it to a neon shop, and hope for the best, and part with a large amount of cash. So I ended up getting an apprenticeship working in a neon shop because, strangely, in the north of England, in West Yorkshire, which is where I'm from, it was the largest fabricator of neon in Europe, not just in the UK, but the whole of Europe, right up until 2003. I did not know this, but when a couple of very large factories closed down, factories that were responsible for like Piccadilly Circus in London and making lighting for shopping malls in the Middle East and things like that, you had all these displaced neon makers setting up shop themselves. And even now, what with neon being deemed as supposedly a dying industry, you have about 7 or 8 neon shops within a 10-15 mile radius of where I am. So yeah, it wasn't unusual to get a job in neon where I'm from. For a couple of years, I just learned the skills of the trade, and I got quite bored with the process. I get bored quite easily, I suppose, wandering mind and all that. And I got a temporary job covering for teaching at a university in Sunderland, covering for another really inspiring artist to me, a chap called Colin Rennie. And I did that for about 6 months, and I got a little bit frustrated about how tying academia can be and how prescribed the teaching of a subject can be. And I decided to combine both my interest in this new thing to myself, neon, and teaching. So I set up neon workshops in my hometown of Wakefield. So we teach neon to anyone who's interested. We fabricate neon now to some of the biggest artists around, and we install. So we've just installed one of our largest neons, it's about 40 meters wide, in a pavilion in Hanover in Germany for Tim Etchells. That happened 2 weeks ago, and it opened yesterday. And in between that, I get to make my own work. So that's first and foremost who I am and what gets me out of bed. And it's not just glass anymore. I'll be honest. I'm interested in everything, whether that's the performative aspect. And I got to know Matt really through some of those early pieces working with performance, and then I dabbled with performance and glass in the early days. And also, installation and printmaking and things like that. So I got to know Jochen very briefly. We were like ships in the night, really, in Edinburgh. He was graduating as I arrived, but I did see his degree show, and I was fascinated by how polished and mature this piece was that he had for a degree show. I mean, looking back to my degree show and going around other people's degree shows now, it's obvious that there's an awful lot of ideas going on at that moment in time, but it's going to require time to polish those things. But Jochen's was obviously already there. He'd already done a lot of things before coming to Edinburgh, including, I'm sure he'll tell you about this himself, but he's a scientific glass maker trained in a factory in Germany, but he's one of the very few people who use those skills to make artwork, his own work. So I had Jochen in the back of my mind, my subconsciousness, for years as I went on working with Neon. When I finally opened up my doors to the Neon workshop, I invited Jochen up from London to give a demonstration and suggested filling one of his beautiful pieces of glass with neon, and that started our journey of collaborating together with filling his pieces with gas. And I'm delighted to say we have our first exhibition with an Italian design studio, MLXL. So there's the three of us at A+A Gallery in Venice, which opened a couple of days ago, and it's on until August. So if any of you find yourself in mainland Venice, I know there's heaps and amazing things going on here all weekend in Murano, but if you are in Venice, then please do check it out. How are we doing back there?
Do you have the address?
The address? Yeah. We've got cards here, but it's in A+A Gallery, San Marco 3073. But yeah, if you're really interested, feel free to grab a card. I'll just come and see us at the end or something. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, so hello, good morning. So yeah, we're a bit late here, obviously, but I'm a UK. I'm originally from Germany. I trained as a scientific lab worker, as Richard said, in Germany, in a place called Hadamar, and afterwards I spent time in the UK. I studied there, did my BA in Edinburgh College of Art, and finally my MA at the Royal College. And then I set up my own studio in East London, and I'm used to make a lot of pieces for other artists and designers, students, and for about 5 years now I do only my own work, which ranges, I sort of cover quite a wide range of things I do. It's always borrow and always lampwork, but I work with color tubing, big diameter, clear tubing, but all by hand. I don't have a lathe, so my sort of language over the years became very wobbly, very organic, to overcome difficulties with working big and precise. So I got a bit frustrated with that. I tried to make a chair during my degree show, a sort of copy of a metal, steel tube metal chair, and I couldn't make all the joints very nicely. So then I decided, let's leave all this precision behind and I make it all so I can realize my ideas, but not be hampered by the glass. That it breaks, or I'm unhappy with the last joint or something like this. So I sort of very consciously decided my work is not about technique and so much, it's just about trying to get the flow into the glass and into my ideas and just be very fluid with everything. So I make most of so the range of things I do is with this, the neon work with Richard, which I explore for a few years now, and I also make sort of one-off pieces and tableware, ranging from sort of tumblers to vases, and I use now a lot of the Chinese tubing, the color tubing you get. Yeah, again, trying to, I don't know, some of the pieces they try to be furnace work, I think, sort of, or I see myself not so much as a lamp worker in a way, but more as something between a ceramicist and a just general glass blower. The language is often a bit more hot glass, so they're sort of trying to make it as big as possible, but as fluid and organic. I collaborate a lot with people, not so much in the glass world, but in design and art, or in fashion. So I make jewelry for a fashion show. I'm collaborating with furniture makers to put neons in wooden shelves, or with other design studios in London. So I'm hanging out a lot with product designers rather than glass makers so much. So I shifted a bit my networking in a different direction, really. I always thought, a room full of glass is kind of difficult, so I'm trying to get exhibitions or opportunities to show which are more mixed up and where glass is just one component of it rather than the whole thing. I don't know. Yeah, as Richard said, I'm pretty on my own there as well in London. There are some other scientific lamp workers, but the sort of style and scale and, I don't know, the colors, nobody else is doing that in the UK. There's some bead making going on and some small scale things. Or, I mean, Ayako is working as well, which, but generally speaking, there's not much going on now. So, yeah, so which I'm really quite happy with that. I'm sort of a bit isolated, but also I thought it would be a nice opportunity to mingle a bit more now, and that's why I came here. Yeah, I don't know. Are there any questions already, or? Yes, yeah, I want to meet them. Yes, yeah, yeah. The American scene is sort of eludes me a bit. It's very big. Yes, yeah. So I didn't quite understand everything, but you said the American glass scene is very big.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't. I haven't had the chance to really meet anybody or go to Eugene or these places where they all are. But yeah, and it would be nice to sort of. Patrick's? No. Okay, yeah. Richard was just saying that I might have missed just to say that it's borosilicate, which is a bit more unusual to use a neon. So we covered that a little bit now. With the borosilicate neon, it's normally the electrodes are only used in France for normal neon making. But it gave me the chance to try and combine my work with neon.
being able to get the electrodes from France. I use a oxygen propane torch. I have a slightly bigger version of this, but I do everything by hand, so I don't have a lathe and or a garage. So my setup is very simple, really. Hopefully we get a very simple setup here as well. Okay.
I wanted to ask a couple of questions. First of all, it's very descriptive what you did, but I wonder how what first attracted you to the material. You can both answer that.
Well, I went to a Steiner school. I don't know if you know these schools. They're private. But there's a lot of crafts teaching there. So we did all sorts of weird things like basket making and silversmithing and leather work, and so this was sort of a continuous thing throughout my early education, and I always enjoyed that the most, really. And afterwards I decided to stay in that craft realm, and that I chose glass was a bit accidental, really. There was this glass school which took me, so I just and it was, I guess the appeal was that it was supposed to be difficult, and I haven't done any glass, and so we didn't cover that because glass is always a bit too strange or involved to cover this at school level. So yeah, it was a love for doing things with my hands, really, I think.
Has anyone read that book, Flickering Light, by Christophe Ribat? It came out about 12 years ago. It's a real page turner. You don't have to be a neon geek or anything to read it. And basically what he's saying in this book is there hasn't been another material in the last 100 years that's infiltrated our culture more, whether that's through war, propaganda, music, movies, theatre, art, architecture, retail, fashion, you name it. And, neon's enjoyed these peaks and troughs of popularity and seem to be riding this peak of popularity again at the moment. And perhaps that's largely down to this mass output of manufacturing, and we're all keen to enjoy the craft side of humanness, whether it's a craft coffee or a craft beer or craft. And there is obviously something about glass that is intoxicating, and we've got some extremely skilled people here at the conference that are happy to make anything as long as they're in front of a furnace, perhaps, or do something, because this process, this performance of making is a very intoxicating and rewarding thing. Over time, as I've got older, the actual obsession with skill for me has become less and less, I'll be honest, and it's become more about the idea of what I'm trying to do and how it's delivered. So in some respects I do feel like a bit of a fake in front of so many people that have so many skills in town right now, but I've certainly just, when it comes to the science aspect with neon, and it really is a bit of a marriage between the two. You can't get away from the fact you need to know a little bit about the science as much as the creativity side. Then I've just learned as I've gone along. I've learned the necessities, if you like.
Can I ask you, for those of us who haven't worked with neon, could you just explain something basic about it? For those of us who haven't worked with neon, can you explain the basics of how it works?
So with neon, you're just exciting gas inside glass with electricity, and it's so romantically simple, I think. You're creating a mini lightning bolt, yeah? It's an arc of electricity from one end to the other. It's plasma, the fourth element, the most recently discovered element, which is what fire is as well. And perhaps that's why neon is so alluring. We all have been at that party and there's a flame pit or a fire in the back garden and we're all kind of staring at it. And that kind of neon has that same effect. Or at least the neon that you see where it's, you can actually see the gas inside the clear glass. There's a number of different ways how to create colours, and the easiest, the cheapest, and the original was using clear glass, like what Jochen's using today, and filling it with one of the gases. And neon gas is just one of the gases. Okay, it's the red gas. And to create all the other colours, we would use argon with a tiny drop of mercury. And I know what with EU legislation coming in with limiting the amount of mercury, there is this chance in the future, certainly in Europe, that we might only be able to use neon gas. But we use that little amount of mercury in a tube. It's a tiny, tiny pea drop. And it also is recyclable and it should be recycled. And I don't think it's really anything to worry about when you consider there's more mercury that erupts into the atmosphere from one single volcanic eruption than the entire amount of fluorescent tubes currently in circulation, you know, if you just put it into context like that. But yeah, neon gas is, metaphorically speaking, the greenest light. It's that bright, it's that vivid, it doesn't really need anything else in it.
Are the EU actually thinking about banning burgers?
Yeah, but then there was an objection to this, and they gave 5 years for a conglomerate of people to come up with an alternative or a solution. And what it's looking like at the moment is that the mercury use in bulbs is going to just be controlled quite heavily using some sort of measuring instrument. So that's the latest what might happen.
Buy a lot of old-style thermometers, and they might break up and you have mercury.
Yeah, well, mercury is readily available on the old internet. You can buy as much of it as you like. You know, it's not a controlled substance, or quicksilver, as they call it in mainland Europe. Yeah. So other ways of creating colour, you've got phosphor-coated tubes, you've got coloured glass, but we tend to always only use a couple of gases in commercial neon, and that's the argon or the neon. And when you get more into plasma art, and there's some terrific examples of the exhibition on the island here, curated by Pat over there, then there's all sorts of methods and different gases and different pressures, and the more pressure you put in, this has an effect. So Jochen touched on the fact we're using borosilicate. It's only really Paris, and that's out of tradition more than anything, that uses borosilicate glass for standard neon tubes, and one or two factories in Germany. The rest of Europe and America, as I understand it, use soft glass, soda. Prior to that, it might have been lead glass, but that's been phased out very quickly now. The great thing about working with borosilicate is it's very forgiving. It's the plastic of the glass world, you could say, and that allows Jochen to make some very wide diameter tubes and joining thick areas with thin areas. Oh, it sounds like we're ready to go. But this demo, which is significantly going to be shorter now, I think, Jochen's going to work with his large torch, which is oxygen and gas, and he's going to attach electrodes to the piece, but we have made a piece already which is ready to be processed, and I'm going to be borrowing Pat's processing kit here, which is very kindly loaned to us for this demonstration. there's two different ways to process tubes. There's the electron bombarder, which really bombards the glass with electric, getting it hot. And there's the oven pump, which is pretty much putting the glass in a kiln, warming it up slowly. Both of those methods, the intention is to get rid of the impurities. That's what you're trying to do. Clean it as much as you can before you put the gas in, so that when that electric arcs through the glass tube, through the gas, it's only lighting up the gas that you want it to light up. So one of the things that Neon Workshops, my company, does is we have mobile setup. And mobile in a very loose sense of the word, it only just fits into a large van because electron bombarders don't really like to travel so much. So that's why this is so special, what Pat's invented. There's one or two aspects that it doesn't do, but for the purposes of this demo, it's ideal. Usually, the nice thing about neon is it's very cheap to do. Clear glass tubes cost pennies or cents. And you can switch the torch on and off when and when you don't need it, unlike a furnace or a kiln which keeps going on for days or weeks.
These are not the normal torches that you would use for traditional neon.
So for traditional neon making, we wouldn't use this sort of torch. This is more for serious lamp working and working with quite wide diameter tube to get a really hot flame to be able to manipulate that borosilicate glass, which requires a much hotter temperature to melt. So we would use a ribbon burner, which is what's used in America as well, and that's the only torch really that was designed specifically for the neon industry, and that allows you to heat up a long length of tube and create these nice slow curves and bends. And then we have a bench torch, which is an elaborate Bunsen burner, if you like. And then a hand torch, which we use either for tipping off or for making tight bends or precision work. This is one of our hand torches, and this actually can have oxygen in it as well, because now and again we do get jobs where we have to work with borosilicate, so the setup at Neon Workshops has the option for working with oxygen. I know in the States, everyone does it differently, and there's so many YouTube videos out there to look at on neon, and they all have their own techniques. There's no right or wrong way, really. But just a little bit about neon. You could say, really, it was the Brits that invented it, it was the French that made the money out of it, it was the Italians that were the first ones to create artwork out of it, and it was the Americans that fell in love with it. Okay? I just thought that. So when it came over to the States, and the first neons were in LA, Los Angeles, they were an instant hit, you know? It caused chaos, there were traffic accidents, people just stared at this thing, they likened it to fire being trained inside glass. Everyone, if you're any sort of reputable company, wanted a neon sign. Well, who was going to make them? The glass people were already busy. So they had to train people up quick, they had to figure out ways to speed the process up. So in the States, you don't get to sit down when you're making neon. A lot of, they don't have bench torches, they have these cannon burners, which both join the glass and bend the glass. And they don't really use hand torches apart from tipping off, sealing off pieces. So this really sped things up. they introduced a blow hose as well, that sped things up as well. It's time being money, I had to churn this out. Are we ready? This is fast turning into a very chatty demonstration.
So what are they trying to set up?
Just the burners here.
Just the torch.
Well, we had to rig up the burners here, and there was a problem with the hoses. The hoses didn't fit on the olive, so now this torch is actually not working properly. It doesn't give me the flame I need. I need a bigger blue flame rather than the bushy yellow flame, which is just not hot enough to do anything to the borosilicate. I just stand there turning the glass forever and ever, and nothing will happen, So, but there is another torch, so we'll try that. I didn't listen to everything that you said now, so I'm out of the loop.
So, what's the future of neon? I would say that's a question that I think about sometimes. We're still in this situation, certainly in the UK, where they made the extremely unwise decision to close down polytechnics and turn them into all universities, so it was more aiming towards academia side rather than practical side. And to the best of my knowledge, there's only 3 places in the whole of Europe where you can go and learn neon, and that's 3 polytechnics, in Lycée Dorian in Paris, in Munich, Germany, and Vienna in Austria. And that's really sad, because unless you allow creatives to roll up their sleeves and play and learn about this thing, then we're just going to keep getting the same old Tracy Emin aspect type text, which hasn't really changed since Bruce Nauman times, responding to its sign-writing associations. And neon, I'm fully aware it's full of associations and walls to bounce off, and which is what makes it so appealing to all sorts of demographic, not just glass people, but when we teach, we bring in people who are long-distance lorry drivers, priests, electricians, people into music, which is another thing that makes it appealing to me. It's very accessible. But I do think, like in the States, there are several art schools in America where you can learn about not only neon, but alongside glass blowing, which allows you to start doing what we are doing, or trying to do here, is work with both glass sculpture and gas.
Hi, I often see neon art with pulsing and moving features.
Yeah.
Is that just a matter of the pressure of the gas, or are there electronic controls, or both, or how about that whole thing?
Well, the chap directly behind you has made a career out of that work, Mr. Wayne Stratman. That is a lot of trial and error, working with pressures of gases, so you may mix gases together, not just one or the other. It's working with different diameters of tube, sometimes not 2 electrodes, which is the traditional thing, but a single electrode piece. Sometimes no electrodes. So let's say, I don't know if any of you have done this, but hold a fluorescent tube up underneath a pylon. It's quite safe. Don't hold me to that. I've done it anyway, and the tube lights up, because of the electric field around the pylon. So as long as you can excite that gas inside the glass, somehow it will glow up. So you don't necessarily need wires linking up this tube. It could be radio fields. It doesn't have to be electric fields either. It can get quite techy, and I have to hold my hands up and say that is not my personal pursuit, but there are some amazing examples in the exhibition here on Murano, the light exhibition. Is there any more?
Sorry, actually.
Can you explain the setup and what you are in?
Yeah, so it's only the second time I've seen this, but yeah, we've got a two-stage, what we call a roughing pump, which does the majority of the work. It's a rotary pump. There's all different types of pumps out there. This is just one method. Some of the real posh bombarders might use something called a turbomolecular pump, but that tends to be more for the second stage, which is the fine drawing down of the pressure. That looks better. In essence, what this is trying to do is suck the air out and put the gas in. That's all it's trying to do. If we had a bombarding aspect, it would be lighting up the tube to make it hot as well as sucking out the air. So these aluminium flasks are a more recent thing. We've got helium on here, neon and argon, which are noble gases. The noble gas term was coined in England, but it's now no more just classed as rare gases. And they are very rare, but they're in the air that we breathe. You're breathing in neon gas right now, you know? Not because we're pumping it into this gym or anything. It's just what goes to create air in finite proportions. And back in the day, they learned how to separate it out of the air by distilling liquefied air. Most people I know use helium as a cleaning gas. I was just speaking to Pat earlier, and he actually just uses any gas to clean with, which that's really cool. But helium has quite a sticky content, so the idea is once you try to clean it first time round, you can flush it with helium, and any remaining impurities will adhere to it, and then you flush it out. So you're trying to make the glass inside absolutely super clean. That's the idea. Okay, so Jochen is just flaring out an electrode at the moment, preparing it for attachment to a wider diameter tube. Back in the day, traditional neon in Europe was a very wide diameter. One of the reasons for that was it would last longer. This recent surge of interest again in neon, it is more Americanized, and you do have a much narrow diameter tube. So that ranges from anything from 8mm up to 12mm diameter tubing. But if you do get to go, I haven't really seen many examples in Venice, I have to be honest. I think there's only one neon shop in Venice, just outside of Neon Lauro. But yeah, other places, if you're doing a tour of Europe, you will see some great examples of neon that are wide diameter tube, the old ones. Very similar to the diameter Jochen's working with. The only downside, or one of the downsides to working borosilicate is the severe limitation of colour that you can work with. So clear glass, readily available, but colours, how many colours do you reckon available? 8, 10? So about 8 transparent ones, 4 opaque colours, roughly.
So you guys don't use any American borosilicate color?
Yeah, but it originally comes from China, apparently.
No.
Oh no.
No, there's so much borosilicate color made in the States.
There you go.
Yeah.
Very handmade tubing, they're too expensive.
Too expensive handmade tubing, apparently.
$50 a pop.
Yeah. Networking, right there.
So I'm just wiggling this through now, making something similar to this, and then attaching the other electrode on the other side.
I always find it quite humorous that Jochen has gone down this line of this very organic form when he has this massive amount of skill where he could make any precision piece he liked, but he does enjoy.
Do you ever use sort of ribbon burner for borosilicate? Do they make tools like that or experiment with those?
So I think the question was, do we use a ribbon burner for borosilicate? Yeah.
So, you can only get quick ones with the soda cup from our they will do chain they're not hot enough, and if you crank them up to borosilicate heat, they make a horrible noise. So the longest one is 20 centimeters. They do this silent version as the borosilicate. And that doesn't help me so much really. So I've got the big Arnold, so with the 50mm heads on, going in diagonally, I can do quite a lot in the same way without having set up.
Yeah, so for those who might not have heard that, there's a restriction on what equipment's available to use a wider length of torch called a ribbon burner for borosilicate, but you can heat up quite a length of tube by putting it as an angle in a bench torch, such as that. So the plan is Jochen's going to do a little bit more manipulating of this tube, and then we're going to move on to this piece that we've already prepared for the processing aspect, and we're going to go through the motions and hopefully get this to light up.
Is there still an industry of handmade scientific glass? I mean, has it been replaced by machinery?
So the question was, is there still an industry of handmade glass? Referring to neon, yeah? Okay, so when it comes to neon, there's no method really of making neon signs in a mechanized fashion other than doing it on a production line. So one person do a little bend, another person do a little bend, maybe the odd little bit of wooden former. And that's how, say, a Budweiser sign might be made if they're churning out several thousand of them, and why you might see them on eBay for a couple $100s. If that was handmade as one bespoke thing, it would be about $7,000–8,000 easy. It's all hand-to-eye coordination, and it's hasn't changed really the method of making neon signs. So all the neon signs you see out there, everyone made by hand. Scientific glass making, that has changed a little bit, to the best of my understanding. There are less universities that have scientific glass blowers as residents making pieces of kit for students, and perhaps Jochen can explain that better than I can when he gets a moment and I'm doing my thing here.
Question? No annealing is required. Is that because the glass is so thin, or?
Annealing is required. You do get away with a lot more with borosilicate, but what Jochen would do after finishing this piece, he would normally put it in a kiln to take the stress out that way.
Or sometimes you just put your go just along, so that anneals naturally. So that just by going along, I don't create a lot of stress in the glass because it's sort of I'm trying to do the piece in 2 stages, so I don't get too much stress into it. Because as I go along, it cools down slowly, so I don't get too many points of stress. I always get in trouble if I go back, to change the shape. If I would go back to this area here now, I might get then stress into it, which that causes it to crack later on. But you can get away without annealing. But preferably, of course, you anneal it. You understand?
So you can't go back. Can't go back.
Well, you can if you put it in the kiln afterwards.
Neon Workshops did a course in New York a couple of years ago, and we had the resident neon maker. It was at a place called Light Bright Neon, Matt Dilling's place, and the neon maker there, very talented, but I was quite surprised at the lack of annealing. And perhaps someone can explain this to me, because I've seen it a few times on YouTube, where they'll bend the glass and they'll press it down onto metal gauze, which is over the top of the pattern, and then so you've thrown all that shock into the glass from the metal, and then there's no annealing that takes place sort of afterwards, which it survives, but it just seems quite shocking to me. Whereas in the UK we don't use metal gauze, we just hover it above the pattern and then just briefly touch it down on the Kevlar mat and then anneal. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I suppose it's what you can get away with in the commercial world, but it's not ideal when we're talking about sculpture that could have a large build-up of stress and break, especially if you paid a lot of money for it. Okay, so could you enamel the borosilicate for it to change colour? That's exactly what Budweiser do. So their branding is quite red. There was no way they were going to spend all that money on red glass, which is exceptionally expensive. It's expensive because it's got gold in it. So what they did is use clear glass with neon gas, and then they just developed a transparent enamel to paint over the top of the clear glass. So yeah, there's all sorts of ways. Probably try to see.
I think it's a golden enamel.
Well, somebody might know in the audience.
Yeah.
So this whole thing, this whole discipline gets coined neon. But as we mentioned earlier, neon is just one gas, the red gas. The correct term is cold cathode lighting. That doesn't sound half as exciting or sexy. But it's very useful for product designers, architects, when they're trying to sell a form of lighting to their client, maybe the lighting of a large shopping mall or something. because neon has these associations with the seedier side of urban life, strip joints, sex shops, takeaways. So yeah, when we say CCL, cold cathode lighting, the clients go, yeah, that sounds nice. And I mean, cold cathode lighting, aka neon, is still the most energy efficient light per lumen output, and to light at large swathes of areas. So even modern areas now are still using this method, gas-filled tube, cold cathode. Included in the title, by the way, it runs cold, it's cold to touch, so all the energy goes direct into light. And whilst it is high voltage, and everyone might be thinking, ooh, high voltage, it's dangerous, it uses exceptionally low current. And a phrase I always thought would make a nice t-shirt print, volts shock, amps kill. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, if on a much colder day than this, if you were to lift up a woolly jumper over your head and you feel all that static, you might be generating up to 50,000 volts. It's not going to kill you. It's the current, it's the dangerous part, and the great thing is we don't use any. And that's also what makes it energy efficient, because you're paying your electric bill, you're paying for the current, the draw out of your plug socket. So yeah, it's a wonderful thing. So if you do get a chance to see our exhibition, one of the pieces is a really large chandelier by Jochen in the window of A+A, and with shapes similar to this, more angular, various gas fills. So the colours of what Jochen uses, he only works with clear glass, pretty much. Now and again he dabbled with transparent colours, but for the exhibition, for instance, it's all gas colours. So argon on its own, which is a beautiful but dull lilac colour. Argon mercury, which is that icebergy blue colour. Helium, which is a fleshy peachy colour. So Jochen's just preparing this piece for us to attach to the manifold. You can make very cheap versions of this by creating a glass manifold, but that wouldn't travel very well. So that's all right for the garage back home. Can I sing? Someone just asked, can I sing? You know, that was my first little career, and that for 10 years I was in a band. And my very good friend David over there, that's how we met, because he photographed my band performing, and maybe that's how I got my performative interest in things.
What kind of music?
What kind of music? Really, really good music.
Sorry, I fucked this up.
It's
okay.
So the fact that this glass might be soda here, or is it soda part or is it boro? The end soda. That's not a problem because we've got these high vacuum rubber hoses now available, so you can very quickly attach borosilicate to soda on a temporary basis, and that's what we're going to do here. feel quite bad because for the large part of this demo, all the pressure is on Jochen.
The color of borosilicate tubing. Can it be bought in like small amounts, or do you need to buy whole crates of it?
Yeah, the question was, can borosilicate tubing be bought in small amounts?
Yeah, the color.
I think the short answer is yes. When it comes to clear tubing from companies like Schott in Germany, they do prefer you to buy cartons in certain amounts, yeah. But then there's smaller outlets, usually in your locality, which will have taken the risk of buying all that, and then they'll sell smaller amounts, you know, to you at a higher price.
Can we reuse, buy old neon? You said that the wide diameter was used. Can you buy it like junk stores and then reuse that?
Yeah, so can you reuse neon tubes? Yeah, you can. A lot of neon shops won't touch or won't fix a neon sign if it's had mercury in it for health reasons. But if you overcome that fact, then yes, you can. I mean, neon gas tubes don't use mercury, so that's fine. We've got an exhibition at Neon Workshops back in Yorkshire by a chap called Jonathan Lang. He's only 20 years old. He's made all these pieces in his bedroom by salvaging pieces of glass or having things donated. He's made something like this. God knows how he hasn't burnt the house down, but he all these beautiful little objects, and he's more of a scientist, and he just sees them as test pieces. One person's test piece is another's work of art, maybe. It's yeah, it's a lovely little show. And he just learned all the knowledge he needed on the old internet. The artist is Jonathan Lang. Yeah. He probably wouldn't see himself as an artist though. He'd get quite embarrassed with that title, but that's what they are really. They're in a gallery.
What was the name of your band?
Nice try. That's securely in the past now, that chapter of my life. Yeah. I do, nowadays I'll sing in the shower. So it looks like we're ready to process this. Pat, do you want to just say something briefly about this piece of kit?
I was going to get him a little helping hand.
Yeah.
This is my vacuum system here. It's a little bit like wearing somebody else's shoes. It's got a heel and a sole and fits on a foot, but it's not really his shoes, so it's a little confusing. So a lot of the components and stuff, since I laid it out, it might be a little easier for me to demonstrate some of what Richard's doing here. Richard's got a gauge back here, right in front of him, that will actually help him to fill the different gas to the pressure that he wants to put in this tube here. And I think we talked about something like 5 torr or a millibar would be in England they would use. And we were just speaking about how the two different styles, obviously they use the metric system and we use the imperial system. And but a lot of these terms are interchangeable. And millibar, torr, and what we are referred to originally as millimeters of mercury. That's something that we commonly use relative to the atmospheric pressure. And so right now we've actually started to evacuate. If you'd seen really quickly, you might have seen a little vapor come up in that tube. And so now we're just bringing it down to a vacuum. Right now the vacuum pump's working. And what do you get? Yeah, that's then we have a gauge that tells us our absolute vacuum, and that's a micrometer. And some of these components, this is actually a thermocouple gauge, and this is a capacitive manometer, and that's what we use to fill it. Okay, yeah, Richard likes to use what we would call a flushing gas, and that's the helium right here. So I'll go ahead and shut off the vacuum. So we'll go ahead and shut off the vacuum for the moment, and then we'll just put a little shot of helium gas inside of the tube, and that will do what Richard had mentioned. It'll attach onto the walls of the interior, and it'll assist us in pumping it back out. So really we're putting a gas into a vacuum, and then now we're about to pump it out. It's referred to as the flushing gas.
What pressure do you pump down to?
Pardon?
What pressure do you pump down?
Generally we pump down to about 8 microns. That would be our absolute. Yeah, go ahead. Now he's going to evacuate out the helium. And so that's just one way to sort of create a better pure environment, like Richard said. You can do that with electricity, which of course you would do, or an oven, but it's just nice to, vacuums are really stupid. They don't like to go around curves and corners. This is a giant, a really small straw with a fairly big lake out here. So it takes it's a bit of an efficiency matter. So it takes a while for this vacuum pump to suck out that, so we assist it by putting the flushing gas into it. And usually the process probably takes about 10 to 15 minutes when you're doing it in your shop. You're actually using the electricity to heat up the tube, but then you want the tube to come back down to room temperature so that when you put in the gas, you're not getting a distortion by heating up the tube. If the tube is hot, you fill your gases, it would distort what that measurement might be. So it's always a process of heating up the tube through the bombarding and then waiting a few minutes. I have a little timer I set, and then we go and put the gas back into what I call a cold tube. But in this case, we're really just doing all cold bombarding. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Yeah, okay. Are you ready to seal it? Oh, okay. Right now he's demonstrating how you put a side tubulation on the electrode there. When you use soft glass, the tubulation is available off the back of the electrode. You buy both tubulated electrodes and non-tubulated electrodes. And so he's doing what we used to do in the older days, but we call them side tubulations. But with Boro, you can only side tubulate. So he just blew a little hole in the side of that, and now he's actually welded a tube onto that. We refer to these small tubes as tubulation. And in the States, like Richard mentioned, we would have a torch that goes from both directions. You've got to move around a bit more when you work this style, the Jochen scale, that you've got to constantly rotate the glass a little bit more. Yeah, so basically what he's doing is just prepping to actually weld on the end here. And so he's finishing off that tubulation, just like he's already done here. You want to go ahead and put the neon gas in there? Yeah. Or I guess we have to wait for him. What we want to do is probably quickly seal it off because we're kind of playing a tricky game here with the vacuum.
So I was just waiting for Jochen to be able to use the hand torch because as soon as we fill this with gas, we want to be sealing it off because there's every chance that there might be a tiny leak somewhere on the apparatus, but at the end of the day, our atmosphere that we're under, which is about 1,000 millibar, is wanting to get into this very, very low pressure space, which is only going to be about 5 millibar. So that's why we want to seal it off. And we seal it off simply by heating up the stem, and when the stem of the glass gets hot, because we're under really low pressure, it just sucks in and creates its own seal, and we just draw it away.
Yeah, so basically we've already talked about it. He's going to close off the number 1 valve, and then he's going to bleed a little bit of this neon in and look at his gauge and wait for it to hit 5 and then turn it off, and sometimes if you accidentally go to 9 or 10 or something like that, you can just open up the vacuum again and evacuate that out. So you're never really hard and fast set until you put the gas in and you sealed off the tube, like Richard's about to do, or Jochen's about to do right now. And they're doing this under very challenging circumstances. This is a little smaller than the torch that they would normally use for sealing off the tube. And when you have a vacuum in there, and you have to be really tricky about how you heat up that tube so that that wall collapses but doesn't suck in, because it could easily just suck in because you have a vacuum. So you have to really watch closely as the glass heats up and sort of draw it away and pull your torch away. So it's kind of like a quick little dance. You see how quickly you did that. And it's you really have to do it with a lot of fluid motion, or you make a stress in your tubulation column. So basically that's a tube. It's got neon gas in it. And I think we should be able to put a transformer on there and light it up.
Just very quickly about transformers or power supplies. There's 2 different types. You've got the more modern one called high frequency transformers, which came around through technology devised by Nikola Tesla, famous scientist. And basically these are switching on and off up to 20,000 times every second. And they've been around since, I think, the 80s. And then the more traditional transformer is an iron-core stray field transformer. It's a very heavy thing. So these are nice, easy, ideal. So we're gonna, basically what it does is, it goes into the wall, it requires your 230, 240 volt mains power supply, or 110 if you're in the States, and then it transforms it up, because we need that high voltage to strike that arc of electricity to create that mini lightning bolt, as we're saying. So in this case, it's kicking out 4,000 volts. But if we don't need 4,000 volts, it'll just self-correct. That's the lovely thing about these high-frequency jobs. And it's quite a high current, this one, 50 milliamps. It might it might not sound very much, considering you need 1,000 milliamps to make just 1 amp, 50 milliamps, but all the neons you see out there in the world, they're being lit with between 18 milliamps and about 50 or 60 milliamps. So not very much, and that's why it's so energy efficient and relatively safe to handle. Okay, so we're going to try and light this up.
There's always a transition in color. We have a process that we call aging in, and that inside of the electrodes is actually a barium coating, and that will accumulate any impurities that are actually still left in the tube. So when we light it up, sometimes it doesn't light up immediately red, and that will, we have this process we basically call aging in, and that is literally always part of the process. And what that does is that allows for this coating on the interior of the electrode to gather up whatever impurities are left in there, and eventually the tube will go from sort of a whitish red to what we know as the true neon red once it's been burned in or aged in anywhere from 4 hours to 10 hours. We usually leave them aging it overnight, and I really like these electrodes with the screw caps. That's something we really don't have much in the U.S. They're really nice European-style electrodes.
Okay, so before we switch this on, it's not going to be super bright red neon and light this whole room up red or anything like that. And to be fair, it might not even be red. I'm guessing it's going to be a real pinky colour, because we haven't managed to get rid of those impurities that I've been banging on about. So the electrode shells are quite magic things. They have something called a emitter coating in them, which cleans the tube whenever it's switched on, but they can only do so much, and that's why you have to get rid of as much impurities as you can. And then for the rest of the tube's life whilst it's switched on, it can handle any remaining impurities which surface later, and those impurities head toward the electrodes and stay there. But we haven't cleaned this. We haven't used a bombarding method or an external heating method, so there will be lots and lots of impurities in this. It lights, but it's not going to have that red neon glow that you'll see in the exhibition that Pat curated. Okay?
And you get a wonderful diffused glow with these large tubes. That's one of the sexy parts, I feel like.
And then also the glass thicknesses. With these pieces, kind of, because they're not coated, you can see inside the light, inside the tube and see the light. It's, I find it very magical because they have this fluffiness to it, like a, and you just see the light, you don't see a coating. So, and the thickness of the glass comes into the whole thing as well. So you get a lot of reflections from the glass and the darkness of the thickness of the glass. And that's why I like to overlook the glass as well, because it gives the glass a real chance to turn as well. Normally, when thin tubing, you don't get the glass. You know, it could be so thin, placing a little part of the thin tubing. It's much more apparent. So if you come closer, maybe afterwards and see
A lot of people make the mistake of taking photographs of neon in the dark, and you only just see this fuzzy light, but especially with Jochen's pieces that working with wide diameter clear glass, they look great during the daytime, and as he says, feel free to come over now and have a closer look. My friend David, who's actually in the crowd as well, he's had many years of taking photos of neon, and he'll probably give you some pointers if you do have any questions on photographing neon. But thank you so much for your patience.